Let's turn now to some news here in France. And a citizens' council of 150 members of the public are meeting today to begin discussions on end-of-life care, including whether assisted suicide should be legalised. As French laws have evolved over the past 2 decades, there are increasing calls to allow medically assisted deaths for those terminally ill. For now, though, palliative care remains the only option for many. So how does the situation here in France compare to elsewhere in Europe? Our Brussels correspondent Dave Keating has been looking into the issue and he joins me live now. Dave, Switzerland is the European country probably most associated with assisted suicide. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, in fact, there's a number of countries in Europe where assisted suicide is legal. For instance, here in Belgium, it's legal, also in the neighboring Netherlands and Luxembourg, and then also in Spain and Germany. And that's for assisted suicide where a doctor actively helps a patient commit suicide. There's also passive assisted suicide or passive suicide. So that is when, for instance, life-saving equipment is turned off that could keep a person alive, but the doctor chooses to turn it off. That is legal in Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and Austria. There are a number of countries where assisted suicide is currently illegal, but they're considering legalizing it, like in France. Those countries include Portugal and Ireland. But then in the rest, it is illegal. And this is a wide variety of different policies on this. Sometimes it's very, very illegal. Sometimes it can be interpreted by the courts, but it is illegal in most European countries. There is no EU legislation around this. There's no EU framework. And interestingly, this does kind of compared to the United States. So somebody in the EU, obviously it's a free travel area, they can just go to the neighboring member state and have an assisted suicide. So for instance, if you lived in Paris, you could just travel on the train 1 hour, you're here in Brussels, and then you could have the procedure. That also exists in the United States, where a handful of states have very tightly regulated assisted suicide. That includes California, New Jersey, Colorado. And so there as well, you could go to a neighboring state to have the procedure, but the US, like the EU, has no federal law covering this. So it is a handful of countries, but the majority of European countries still have assisted suicide as illegal.
As you say, though, Belgium, where you are, is one of those countries where it is legal. It's still a controversial issue, though. So how difficult was it to pass the law in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting case study because Belgium is a neighbor of France, speaking the same language, part of it speaking the same language. The assisted suicide law here was passed 2 decades ago, so this has been on the books for a really long time. And Belgium actually has some of the most liberal policies for assisted suicide in the world, along with the Netherlands. Like a lot of these social, moral issues, Belgium tends to follow the Netherlands immediately. They did so with gay marriage. They did so also with assisted suicide. The Netherlands passed it 1 year earlier than Belgium in 2001, and both countries have now made it legal also for children. Belgium passed that law in 2013, and I'm told, I wasn't here in Belgium 2 decades ago, but I'm told it wasn't hugely controversial. Belgium is not a particularly religious country, nor is the Netherlands, and so on these issues, they tend to be out front. This was passed as completely legislatively. It wasn't forced by a court or anything like that. So here in Belgium, it's been relatively without incident. Now, since it was passed over the past 2 decades, around 1,400 people per year avail themselves of this right, almost entirely in cases where the person is terminally ill. But Belgium and the Netherlands also allow people to choose this procedure if they have a mental disease. And Belgium and the Netherlands are the only 2 countries in the world that allow that, actually. So it's a fairly liberal policy here compared to the rest of the world, and it hasn't caused a huge amount of controversy here, although there have been court cases over the years with doctors who kind of tested the limits of the law.
Dave Keating in Brussels. Thanks very much indeed.